Captain Jake Morrison stood very still as the alien judges spoke. The courtroom was huge and filled with strange creatures from across the galaxy. Jake's hands were locked in metal chains that glowed with blue energy. Behind him, his crew of 12 humans waited in the same glowing chains. The main judge was a tall crystal being that sparkled like diamonds. Her voice echoed through the room like music, but her words were not kind. "We have decided your fate," she said. "You humans broke our laws. You went to places that were forbidden. You destroyed our ancient buildings." Jake wanted to speak, but the chains would not let him. They had been exploring empty star systems, looking for new homes for human colonies. The buildings the aliens talked about were not buildings at all. They were weapon platforms that shot at his ship first. But the aliens did not want to hear his side of the story. "You will spend the rest of your lives in prison," the crystal judge continued. "You will go to Void Station Omega. It is the most secure prison in all of space. No one has ever escaped from there." Jake looked at his crew. Lieutenant Amy Carter was his second in command. She was smart and brave, and right now she was looking at him with a small smile. That smile told Jake she was thinking the same thing he was. The aliens had made a big mistake by keeping all the humans together. Next to Amy stood Danny Torres, their engineer. Danny could fix anything or build anything from spare parts. Lisa Parker was their pilot. She could fly any ship better than most aliens could walk. Kevin Adams was their doctor, but he also knew a lot about explosives. Each person on his crew had special skills that the aliens did not understand. The guards pushed them toward a transport ship. The ship's captain was a creature with 6 arms and blue skin. His name was Kliktar, and he seemed very proud of the prison they were going to. Void Station Omega has held dangerous criminals for over 300 years, Kliktar told them as they flew through space. No one has ever escaped, not even once. The station exists in a special dimension that you can only reach through special gates. Even if prisoners somehow got outside, they would die in the empty space between dimensions. Jake listened carefully to every word. He watched the screens that showed where they were going. Lisa was watching too, and Jake knew she was remembering everything she saw. Danny was looking at the ship's machines with the eye of someone who understood how things worked. The journey took 3 days. During that time, Jake talked quietly with his crew. They could not plan an escape openly because the aliens were watching them, but they could share looks and small words that meant a lot. "The aliens think they know everything about escaping," whispered Carl Brooks, their weapons expert. "But they have never dealt with humans before. Every prison has weak spots," added Ben Hayes, who handled their communications. "We just need to find them." When Void Station Omega appeared in front of them, Jake had to admit it looked impressive. The prison was enormous, bigger than most cities. It floated in swirling clouds of strange energy that hurt to look at. The whole structure was made of black metal that seemed to absorb light. "Beautiful, is it not?" asked Kliktar. "The finest engineers in the galaxy designed it. They thought of every possible way a prisoner might try to escape. The walls are made of the strongest metal in existence. The floors create force fields that stop digging. The ceilings have gravity traps that prevent climbing. Each cell exists in its own small dimension, so prisoners cannot talk to each other." Jake nodded as if he was impressed, but inside he was thinking. The aliens were very smart, but they thought like aliens. They had built their perfect prison to stop aliens from escaping. They had never had to deal with humans before. Humans were different. They did not give up easily. They found ways to solve problems that other species thought were impossible. They worked together in ways that surprised everyone. Most importantly, they were very good at making new problems that no one had thought of before. As the transport ship moved closer to the prison, Jake felt something he had felt many times before. It was the same feeling he got before every successful mission during the human expansion into space. It was the feeling that told him the impossible was about to become possible. The docking bay of Void Station Omega was filled with guards from different alien species. They all carried weapons that glowed with energy. They all looked very serious and professional. They had done this many times before with many different types of prisoners, but they had never processed humans before. "Welcome to your new home," said one of the guards, a large creature that looked like walking stone. "You will never leave this place. Accept this fact, and your time here will be easier." Jake looked around at the docking bay, at the guards, at the massive walls and the humming machinery. Everything was designed to crush hope and make prisoners give up. The aliens had built the perfect prison. There was just one problem with their perfect prison. It had never been tested against human stubbornness, human creativity, and the human refusal to accept that anything was truly impossible. As they were led deeper into the station, Jake began to smile. The aliens thought they had caught the galaxy's most dangerous criminals. What they had actually done was give 12 humans a new challenge to solve, and humans were very good at solving challenges. Warden Saxter was very proud of his prison. He was a huge creature made of living rock, and he had run Void Station Omega for 47 years without any problems. Not one prisoner had ever escaped during his time as warden. These new human prisoners would not change that record. He watched through thick glass as the 12 humans were brought into the processing center. Dr. Yilmuth, the station's alien scientist, stood next to him making notes. "These humans are interesting, Doctor," Yilmuth said. "Their muscles are very dense. Their bones are thick and strong. They must come from a world with heavy gravity." Saxter made a deep rumbling sound of agreement. "Their home planet records show they lived in harsh conditions. But harsh conditions do not help against quantum locks and dimensional barriers." The humans were taken to separate cells, far apart from each other. Each cell was a masterpiece of prison engineering. The walls were made of neutronium, the strongest metal known to science. The floors created energy fields that made digging impossible. The ceilings had gravity generators that prevented climbing. Each cell existed in its own tiny dimension, completely cut off from the others. The prison designers had thought of everything. They had studied how dozens of different alien species might try to escape. They had built defenses against every known method of breaking out of prison. What they had not planned for was that humans had their own ways of doing things. Jake Morrison sat in his cell and began tapping on the wall. The taps were in a pattern, creating vibrations that traveled through the metal structure of the station. The sounds reached the other cells, where his crew members heard them and understood. It was an old Earth code called Morse code, and no alien had ever heard of it. Within a few hours, Jake had made contact with all of his crew members. He learned many interesting things through their secret conversations. Kevin Adams, their doctor, had already started studying the food they were given. He was looking for chemicals that could be used as weapons. "The aliens do not know much about human body chemistry," he tapped back to Jake. "I can make things they would never expect." Lisa Parker, their pilot, had discovered something important about her cell. The gravity barriers that were supposed to stop her from climbing flickered every 4.7 seconds. This meant they were connected to the station's main power system, and power systems could be predicted and manipulated. Danny Torres, their engineer, had made friends with his cell's cleaning robot. The little machine came in every day to clean his cell, and Danny had convinced it that its cleaning program needed to be changed. Now the robot was bringing him small tools that he was not supposed to have. The biggest surprise came from Ben Hayes, their communications expert. The energy fields that stopped alien telepaths from talking to each other also blocked the station's ability to monitor certain radio waves. Ben had turned his cell's waste disposal unit into a simple radio transmitter. "Jake, you need to hear this." Ben's voice crackled through their improvised communication system. "I have been listening to the station's outside messages. Something big is happening in the galaxy. The alien government is moving warships around." Jake absorbed this news while he continued to examine his cell. He was looking for weaknesses, for design flaws, for anything that could be exploited. The aliens had built their prison to contain known threats, but humans had a gift for becoming threats that no one had seen before. Every system had a weakness. Every design had a flaw. Every rule had an exception. Jake just had to find them. As the station's artificial night began, Jake learned more about his prison. The cell walls were incredibly strong, but they expanded and contracted slightly as the temperature changed. The energy fields were powerful, but they drew their power from generators that could be overloaded. The dimensional barriers were impressive, but they followed patterns that could be predicted. Most importantly, the aliens had made their cells too comfortable. They provided food, water, air, waste disposal, and even entertainment. Each of these systems was a potential weakness, a way into the larger prison network. Danny Torres was especially excited about the waste disposal system. "Jake, this is beautiful," he said through their communication network. "The aliens have connected every cell to a central processing system. If I can access the maintenance tunnels through the waste pipes, I can reach the main engineering section." "That sounds disgusting," replied Carl Brooks, their weapons specialist. "Sometimes the best plans are disgusting," Danny answered cheerfully. Lisa Parker was making her own discoveries. Her cell's window showed the swirling energy outside the station, but it also showed something else. Every 72 hours, the dimensional gates that connected the prison to normal space opened for maintenance. During those brief moments, escape might be possible. "The maintenance window lasts exactly 3 minutes and 17 seconds, Lisa reported. "If we could somehow reach the outside of the station during that time, we could use the dimensional currents to get back to normal space. But we would need a ship." "Where would we get a ship?" asked Amy Carter. Ben Hayes had been monitoring the station's supply schedule. "A supply ship comes every week," he said. "The next one arrives in 4 days. It docks at the main bay and stays for 6 hours while they unload supplies." Jake felt excitement building in his chest. His crew was doing what humans did best. They were looking at an impossible situation and finding ways to make it possible. They were not giving up. They were not accepting their fate. They were planning. "Here is what we are going to do," Jake began. He outlined a plan that would seem crazy to any other species in the galaxy. But humans had been doing crazy things since they first looked up at the stars and decided to visit them. The plan required perfect timing, improvised technology, and the kind of desperate courage that had carried humanity from one world to 1,000 colonies. It also required them to work together across dimensional barriers, using nothing but cleverness and determination. As the station's second night cycle began, 12 humans in 12 separate cells were preparing for something that had never been attempted before. They were going to prove that the galaxy's most secure prison had one fatal weakness. It had never been designed to hold humans. Danny Torres had always believed that any machine built by intelligent beings could be understood by other intelligent beings. As he worked on his cell's air conditioning system, he thought about how alien engineers were different from human engineers. The aliens built layer upon layer of safety systems, creating machines so complex that failure seemed impossible. The problem with that thinking was that complexity created opportunity. "Danny, what have you found?" Jake's voice came through their secret communication network that now connected all 12 cells. "I have mapped the entire power system," Danny replied, his hands never stopping their work on the wall panel he had opened. The whole station runs on a trilithium fusion reactor. But here is the interesting part. They have manual controls for everything. The aliens who designed this place did not trust computer systems. This was valuable information. Manual controls meant physical switches and circuits that could be reached and changed by someone who knew what they were doing. And Danny knew exactly what he was doing. 3 levels up in the medical section, Kevin Adams was conducting his own experiments. When he had been processed into the prison, the medical bay had treated a small cut on his hand. During that treatment, he had managed to take several items that the alien scanners had not recognized as dangerous. Human chemistry was apparently strange enough that the alien medical computers had gaps in their knowledge. "I have created something interesting," Kevin reported during their evening communication time. "The cleaning chemicals they use contain compounds that become very unstable when mixed with human saliva. Nothing dangerous in small amounts, but if I could gather enough of it, double quotes, Kevin trailed off, but everyone understood. He was building a weapon from cleaning supplies and spit. Only humans would think of something like that. Lisa Parker was making her own discoveries about the station's flight systems. Her cell had a small window that showed the dimensional energy swirling outside, but more importantly, it showed the quantum gates that were the station's only connection to normal space. She had been timing the gate cycles, memorizing the energy patterns, and calculating the exact paths needed for dimensional travel. "The gates operate on a 72-hour cycle," she reported. "But there is a maintenance window every 24 hours with it. Barriers drop for exactly 3 minutes and 17 seconds. If we could reach the outside hall during that window, we could use the dimensional currents like a river. But we would need a ship. We would still be floating in interdimensional space," pointed out Carl Brooks, their heavy weapons specialist. "Not necessarily," Lisa replied. "I have been studying the energy patterns. The dimensional currents flow in predictable ways. With the right calculations and a lot of luck, we could ride them back to normal space. But the timing would have to be perfect." That was when Ben Hayes made his most important discovery. While monitoring the station's communications, he had detected something that changed everything. A supply ship was scheduled to arrive in 18 hours. The ship would dock at the station's main bay, and its crew would be completely unaware that they were about to encounter the galaxy's first human prison break. "The supply ship is called Star Trader," Ben reported. "It has a crew of 4 aliens. They will be here for 6 hours while they unload food and equipment. Their ship has a standard hyperspace drive and enough fuel to reach the nearest human colony." Jake listened to all the reports with growing excitement. His crew was doing what humans did best. They were looking at an impossible situation and finding ways to make it possible. But they needed coordination, timing, and a little bit of luck. "Here is what we are going to do," Jake began, outlining a plan that would have seemed impossible to any other species in the galaxy. But humans had been doing impossible things since they first decided to leave their home planet. The plan started with Danny creating a controlled power failure that would look like a natural system breakdown. While the aliens were distracted by the electrical problems, Kevin would release his chemical weapon through the air system. The chemicals would not hurt anyone, but they would make the alien guards sleepy and confused. During the confusion, the humans would break out of their cells using techniques that Jake had learned during humanity's expansion wars. Lisa would navigate them through the station to the docking bay where the supply ship waited. Carl would handle any guards they encountered along the way. The most dangerous part would be timing their escape with the dimensional gate maintenance window. They would have exactly 3 minutes and 17 seconds to steal the supply ship and escape through the quantum gate before it closed again. "What about the supply ship crew?" asked Amy Carter. "We take control of their ship, but we do not hurt them," Jake replied. "Humans do not kill innocent people. even when escaping from prison. The plan required split-second timing, improvised technology, and a kind of desperate courage that had made humans famous across the galaxy. It also required them to work together across dimensional barriers, using nothing but ingenuity and determination. As Jake explained each person's role in the escape, he realized that they were about to attempt something that had never been done before. No one had ever escaped from Void Station Omega. The prison had held criminals from dozens of different species for over 3 centuries without a single successful breakout. But no one had ever tried to imprison humans there before. "Are we really going to do this?" asked Pete Morgan, their youngest crew member. "We are humans," Jake replied simply. "We do not give up. We do not accept defeat. We find a way, or we make a way." One by one, his crew members confirmed that they understood their roles. Danny would sabotage the power systems. Kevin would deploy his chemical weapon. Lisa would navigate their escape route. Carl would clear any obstacles. Ben would monitor communications and warn them of any problems. The others would follow Jake's lead as they fought their way from the most secure prison in the galaxy to freedom among the stars. As the station's third artificial night began, 12 humans in 12 isolated cells were preparing for something that defied every principle of galactic prison design. They were going to prove that the galaxy's most secure prison had one critical flaw. It had been built by aliens who had never encountered human stubbornness, human creativity, and the complete human refusal to accept that anything was truly impossible. Breakout would begin in 15 hours, and the galaxy was about to learn why humans had gone from a single world to a spacefaring civilization in just a few centuries. They never knew when to quit. The supply ship Star Trader docked with Void Station Omega exactly when it was supposed to. Captain Vilinix and his crew of 3 aliens expected a normal delivery of food and repair equipment. They had made this trip many times before and knew the station's routines perfectly. What they did not know was that their ship's arrival had started the final phase of an escape plan that broke every rule of Bola. Galactic Prison Design. In Cell Block 7, Jake Morrison was putting the finishing touches on his part of the operation. Using skills he had learned during humanity's wars in space, he had managed to weaken his cell's neutronium wall by making it expand and contract with heat. The process had taken almost 20 hours, but human stubbornness was legendary for good. "Reason, Phase 1 is ready," Jake announced through their communication network. "Danny, start your part." 3 levels down in the engineering section, Danny Torres had spent the last day learning everything about Void Station Omega's power systems. The alien engineers had built multiple backup systems, but they had not considered that someone might want to cause a controlled breakdown rather than prevent one. His changes to the power grid would create a chain reaction that looked like natural equipment failure, starting power problems in 3.2.1. The station's lights flickered as Danny's carefully planned electrical surge traveled through the power systems. Emergency procedures activated automatically, but they were designed to handle equipment breaking down, not sabotage by a species that treated jury rigging like an art form. In the medical section, Kevin Adams was ready with his chemical surprise. The compounds he had made from cleaning supplies and human body chemistry were now spread throughout the air recycling system. When the power problems caused the ventilation to switch to backup mode, his mixture would be spread through the air as a mild sleeping drug. It would not hurt the aliens, but it would make them very sleepy. "Sleep time has started," Kevin reported as the station's air systems began spreading his improvised drug. The first sign that something was wrong came when Warden Saxter noticed that his security guards were becoming slow and confused. The second sign was when multiple system alarms began sounding at the same time. The third sign was when he realized that the power problems were following a pattern that seemed almost intelligent. "Security alert," Saxter announced, his massive stone body moving toward the command center. All guards to maximum alert. Something is happening. But his guards were dealing with Kevin's sleeping drug, Danny's electrical sabotage, and the growing realization that their supposedly escape-proof prison was developing problems faster than they could fix them. Lisa Parker was watching the chaos from her cell while getting ready for the most dangerous part of the plan. When the power problems reached the dimensional barrier controls, she would have exactly 47 seconds to break out of her cell and reach the maintenance tunnel that led to the station's main transportation system. Barrier problem detected. She announced, "I am moving." What happened next would be talked about in galactic security circles for decades. Lisa did not just break out of her cell. She broke out so efficiently that the security recordings would later be studied by military schools across the galaxy. Her movements were precise, economical, and completely ruthless in their effectiveness. Meanwhile, Carl Brooks had turned his cell into a weapons factory. Using nothing but standard prison items and his knowledge of human military engineering, he had created devices that could break through neutronium walls, disable security systems, and clear hallways of hostile guards. Weapons ready for delivery. Carl reported with professional satisfaction. Ben Hayes had been busy too. His monitoring of the supply ship's communications had revealed their security codes, crew size, and most importantly, when they planned to leave. The window for escape was getting smaller, but it was still possible if everything went according to plan. Of course, no plan survived contact with reality, but humans had always been good at changing plans on the fly. As alarms began screaming. Throughout Void Station Omega, Jake broke through his weakened cell wall like it was made of paper. The neutronium that was supposed to be unbreakable had been compromised by human engineering and human patience. He stepped into the corridor and immediately began moving toward the rendezvous point where his crew would meet. The station's corridors were filled with confused aliens stumbling around under the influence of Kevin's sleeping drug. Emergency lights painted everything red, while sirens wailed warnings about system failures, security breaches, and dimensional stability problems. Danny emerged from the engineering section with a satisfied smile. Half of the station's systems were now under his control, and the other half were too busy fighting fires to notice what he was doing. He had turned the aliens' own technology against them in ways they had never imagined. "I have control of the docking bay doors," Danny announced. "The supply ship is locked in, but I can release them when we are ready to go." Kevin appeared from the medical section, carrying several items that looked harmless, but could be very dangerous. In the right hands, his chemical warfare had been more successful than expected. Different alien species had reacted to his drugs in different ways, and now the guards were more afraid of each other than they were of escaping prisoners. "The guards think their fellow guards are trying to poison them," Kevin reported with clinical interest. "It seems that cooperation between different species breaks down quickly under stress." Lisa reached the transportation hub and began systematically overriding every security protocol that stood between the crew and the docking bay. Her pilot training had included study of alien navigation systems, but she was discovering that practical experience was much more useful than book learning. "I have a clear path to the supply ship," Lisa announced, "but we need to move fast. The dimensional barriers are starting to compensate for Danny's power problems." The crew moved through the station like a force of nature. They had trained together for years, fought together in space battles, and survived together in impossible situations. Now they were applying all of that experience to the problem of escaping from the galaxy's most secure prison, the supply ships. Crew was having their own crisis. Captain Velenix and his team had been exposed to Kevin's chemical surprise through the station's shared air systems, and their normally efficient operations were becoming increasingly confused. They were so focused on their own problems that they completely missed the approach of 12 humans who had just done something that was supposed to be impossible. Carl Brooks reached the docking bay first, his improvised weapons having cleared a path through security checkpoints that had been designed to stop escape attempts. What they had not been designed to stop was someone who approached the problem from the perspective of military assault rather than prisoner escape. Docking bay secured, Carl reported. The supply ship crew is neutralized but unharmed. The 12 humans converged on the supply ship Star Trader like pieces of a precision machine. Each person knew their role. Each person executed their part perfectly, and together they transformed from prisoners into escapees in a matter of minutes. Jake was the last to reach the ship, having taken a detour through the station's command center. He wanted to leave a message for Warden Saxter, something to remember them by. On the main control console, he left a simple note written in standard galactic script. "Thank you for the stay. Your hotel has excellent security. We look forward to telling others about it, the humans." As the crew secured the supply ship and prepared for the most dangerous part of their escape, Jake felt the same satisfaction he had felt after every successful mission. They had taken an impossible situation and made it possible through human ingenuity, human determination, and human refusal to give up. The galaxy's most secure prison was about to learn why it should never try to hold humans. Warden Saxter had run Void Station Omega for 47 years without a single incident. In the span of 23 hours and 14 minutes, 12 humans had turned his perfect prison into complete chaos. Emergency lights bathed the corridors in red, while alarms screamed warnings about multiple system failures, security breaches, and dimensional stability problems. How is this possible? Saxter roared at his chief engineer, a normally competent alien who was now frantically trying to regain control of systems that seemed to be failing in impossible ways. The answer was simple. Humans did not accept the word impossible. Jake Morrison and his crew had taken control of the supply ship Star Trader without firing a single shot. The alien crew was unconscious but unharmed, secured in their own cargo bay with enough air and water to last until rescue arrived. Jake had left them a note explaining that they were not hurt and would be released as soon as the humans reached safety. "Dimensional gate opens in 90 seconds, Lisa announced from the pilot's seat. She had spent the last few minutes studying the supply ship's controls and learning how to fly an alien vessel she had never seen before. For most people, this would be impossible. For Lisa, it was just another Tuesday. Danny had transferred complete control of the station's docking systems to the supply ship. The massive bay doors that normally required authorization from 3 different security stations now opened at the touch of a button. He had also arranged a few surprises for anyone who tried to follow them. "I have programmed the station's defense systems to have a slight malfunction," Danny reported with a grin. "If anyone tries to launch pursuit ships, they are going to have some interesting technical difficulties." Kevin was monitoring the health of both the crew and their unconscious prisoners. His chemical weapons had worked better than expected, but he was a doctor first and wanted to make sure no one was seriously hurt. "Everyone is healthy," Kevin announced. "The aliens will wake up in a few hours with mild headaches. Sleeping. Drug will leave their systems completely within 12 hours." Ben was listening to all communication frequencies, monitoring the chaos they were leaving behind. The station's distress calls were being transmitted across the galaxy, but the nearest government response vessels were still hours away. More importantly, he was tracking the dimensional gate cycle. "Gate opens in 60 seconds, Ben announced. "Lisa, we need to hit that opening perfectly, or we will be stuck between dimensions forever." Carl had positioned himself at the ships weapon controls just in case they encountered any resistance during their escape. The supply ship was not built for combat, but Carl had found ways to make its mining lasers significantly more dangerous than their designers had intended. "Weapons are ready," Carl reported. though I hope we do not need them. Jake stood behind Lysa's pilot's seat, watching the swirling dimensional energies outside the docking bay. In 60 seconds, those energies would part for exactly 3 minutes. And 17 seconds, creating a window back to normal space. If they missed that window, they would be trapped in interdimensional space with no way home. 30 seconds, Ben counted down. Lisa's hands danced over the alien controls with growing confidence. She had figured out the ship's navigation system and calculated the exact vector they needed to hit the dimensional gate at precisely the right moment. It would require split-second timing and a little bit of luck. 15 seconds, Ben continued dot behind. Them, Void Station Omega was slowly regaining control of its systems. Emergency crews were fighting the fires that Danny had started. Security teams were trying to understand how 12 prisoners had vanished from supposedly escape-proof cells. And Warden Saxter was reading Jake's note with a mixture of anger and grudging respect. 5 seconds, Ben announced. Here we go, Lisa said calmly. The supply ship, Star Trader, launched from Void Station Omega's docking bay, just as the dimensional barriers dropped for their scheduled maintenance cycle. Lisa's calculations had been perfect. The ship entered the quantum gate at exactly the right moment, using the dimensional currents to translate back into normal space. The transition was violent and disorienting. The ship shook like it was coming apart, and several crew members were thrown against the walls despite their safety harnesses. For a moment that seemed like forever, they existed in both dimensions at the same time, caught between reality and the void. Then they were through. Stars appeared outside the viewports. Real stars in real space, not the swirling energies of the interdimensional void. Ben immediately began scanning for their location, while Lisa brought the ship under control. We are in the outer rim, Ben reported with relief. About 12 light years from the nearest human colony. We made it. Behind them, Void Station Omega slowly stabilized as its automated systems regained control. The dimensional gate closed on schedule, sealing the prison back into its pocket dimension. Warden Saxter stood in his command center, holding Jake's note and trying to understand how 12 prisoners had turned his perfect prison into a launching pad for the galaxy's first successful escape. The news of the escape spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Within hours, every news service was reporting the impossible story. The galaxy's most secure prison, which had held dangerous criminals for over 3 centuries without a single successful escape, had been broken by 12 humans in less than 24 hours. Different species reacted to the news in different ways. Some were impressed by human ingenuity. Others were terrified of human unpredictability. A few alien governments began reviewing their own prison systems, wondering what other impossible things humans might accomplish. The human colonies reacted with pride and celebration. Jake Morrison and his crew had become heroes overnight, symbols of humanity's refusal to give up even in the most hopeless situations. Their escape proved what humans had always believed. There was no such thing as an impossible problem. Only problems that had not been solved yet. As the Star Trader made its way toward human space, Jake gathered his crew in the ship's small meeting room. They had accomplished something that would be remembered for generations, but they had also made powerful enemies across the galaxy. We are free, Jake told his crew, but we are also fugitives. The galactic government will never stop hunting us. Our lives have changed forever, so what do we do now? Asked Amy Carter. Jake smiled the same smile he had worn in the courtroom when the alien judges pronounced their sentence. We do what humans always do, he said. We find a way to make the impossible possible. We show the galaxy that humans cannot be caged, cannot be controlled, and cannot be stopped. The supply ship continued on its course toward human space, carrying 12 former prisoners who had just taught the galaxy an important lesson. The most secure prison in known space could not hold humans for 24 hours. And that was just the beginning of what humanity would teach the galaxy about the true meaning of freedom. Years later, when historians wrote about the Great Escape from Void Station Omega, they would note that it marked a turning point in human-alien relations. The galaxy had tried to judge humanity by alien standards and found them guilty. But humans had their own standards, their own laws, and their own definition of justice. From that day forward, the galaxy would never again underestimate what humans could accomplish when they set their minds to it. The galaxy's most secure prison had learned why you should never try to cage the human spirit. Because humans, Jake Morrison had proven, always found a way.